over the rainbow.
Hey, storymakers, and welcome to Tellwell the Podcast, where we're inviting you into the conversations that we get to have every day with our clients and our friends, the folks that we call our storymakers. Speaking of friends, I am in studio with one of my dearest, Duncan Williamson. Hi, Duncan.
Hello. How's it going this morning?
It is a great day for a great day. And as we think about the start of this podcast, what I'm very, very intrigued by is we're going to be talking about how to think different and how to brainstorm and how to get out of your own way when it comes to like new ideas and thoughts and things for clients and for yourselves. So I thought it'd be interesting as a bit of a primer to test you on what are Tellwell's rules for brainstorming.
Well, that's a great test. A little hard way to start the morning with a quiz, a pop quiz.
By the way, it's 8:30 in the morning, so it's not that early. One and two.
If you know me, 8:30 in the morning is pretty early.
Duncan
on my
likes to ramp into it.
I sure do. Well, I think first of all, brainstorming is one of like the most fun parts of the work we get to do at Tellwell. Anytime we can get a group of us together in a room and talk about a project or a problem, it's one of the most fun things, I think, for all of our team. But there are some things that we want to do to make sure that we make those brainstorming sessions welcoming. We make sure that there's something that everybody feels like they're able to participate in.
A safe space.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And especially, I think a lot of times you're in that session, I'm in that session, one of our other seniors might be. And we want to make sure that it doesn't feel like we're the loudest voices in the room. We're the ones that need to talk first, all of those things. But I think a few of the things that we talk about, I think one of them is editing your story in real time, right? All of us do this. We'll put a caveat at the beginning of the thing we say. I don't know if this is a good idea, but,
or I hate that.
It's really tough. You hear people, they say their idea and then as they're getting through it, they start to maybe not feel as confident. And they're like, maybe that's not the best idea. Or actually, I guess that won't work in this situation. Mm-hmm. And you start to get rid of these ideas before they've even really been able to have a conversation about it. So that's a big one, is editing in real time. I think one of the other things that we talk about a lot too is that no idea is a bad idea. Mm. When we're in that really early brainstorming phase, that's a time to put all of the ideas on the whiteboard, on the digital whiteboard if you're using one of those. Like, we want to hear all of these ideas. We want to hear people that come from different perspectives on a problem. Maybe it's their first time hearing about it versus somebody like you and me that's been sitting with it for 2 or 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. So no idea is a bad idea.
I love that Brene Brown refers to this in a little bit of a different context, but she calls it the shitty first draft. And I love that because I do think that the more crappy versions you can put out, either one like leads you into something really polished and beautiful or gives you a lot of confidence in that final piece to be like, look at all these really shitty ideas and look at what we got to, right? We did the work to get here, and it can give you just that much more confidence.
Well, it gives you a little bit of that, like the value in seeing the path that you've gone down to get to your solution, which is really nice to see as a creative. And then I think the last one is storming, forming, and norming. And so this is an approach we take. We talk to our team about this all the time. And that's start with that brainstorm, start with the putting all of the ideas on the board, right? Then forming, we're going to start to think about those ideas, what works best, how can we adjust, make these little changes to some of the ideas. Maybe we find the ones that we're the most excited about. Mm-hmm. And then once you get through that, we talk about norming. And that's where we start to make those ideas into something that we can repeat over time. They're a norm, they're normal to us now, right? And so storming, forming, and norming would be that third thing that we do here at Tellwell.
Brilliant. Well, A+, you passed. I'm very proud.
I was worried.
I am proud of you. Today's conversation is with one of my dear, dear friends, Janese Evans. Janese runs a company called the Strategic Toolbox. And what is fascinating is she is like this quiet gladiator behind some of like the most impressive products in the world. She's based in the Twin Cities. And if you know anything about the Twin Cities, like some of the country's largest food producers are based there, like General Mills. But then there are also folks like 3M and Target and the large agriculture organizations as well. So what's fascinating is she is just like, she's kind of quiet. And she's kind of like, well, we can come up with some crazy ideas. And what's the worst thing that happens? Somebody fires us. And so it's just such a refreshing version of it. And she has this great product that we're going to talk about a little bit as well. So rather than me talking about how great she is, let's just get right into the episode with Janese Evans. On Tellwell the Podcast, we have my dear friend and mentor and all-around amazing person, Janese Evans from Strategic Toolbox. Hi, Janese.
Well, how kind of you. Hi. It is so great to see your face, and thanks for including me in this.
It's so great to see your face. So, Janese, we've known each other for longer than we probably care to admit at this point.
Long time.
It hasn't been that long. Hasn't it only been like 6 or 7 years?
Maybe like deeply, but not long.
Yes. Deep and that reminds me of the old Bible camp song, Deep and Wide. Anyway, the number of times that Bible camp songs get referenced on this podcast is, I'm not sad about.
Are we up to 1 at this point now?
I think we're actually up to 3 because there was one that we referenced 2. But Janese and I met when we were both serving on the International Board of Trustees of a group called Destination Imagination.
We met before that, buddy.
We did.
We met at Jackson Middle School.
That's right, Jackson Middle School in somewhere in Minnesota. I tried to kick
you out of the secret hallway.
Yes, you did. And I was like, who is this spunky lady? Oh, I forgot about that meeting.
Yeah. So I think that was the first time I met you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was kind of a guest of the tournament, and I was walking around with the affiliate director and also the chair of the board at the time. And we walked down this hallway, which in fairness, the instant challenge hallway of a Destination Imagination tournament is maybe the most secretive part of the tournament.
Super secret.
Super secret. Nobody's allowed. And nope. Janese came out and said, "You can't be here." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I know you're right," but I felt important at the time. So
I think I kicked out a lot of people that day, actually. But yes.
Fair enough.
You should probably talk a little about what Destination Imagination is, because I don't know how widely known that really is. It is to us, but...
Fair enough. So Destination Imagination is a competition for kiddos that teaches the creative process. We used to introduce it as a creative problem-solving competition for kids, but it really ranges from engineering to arts to environmental stuff and entrepreneurship. But it really does. It's kind of like STEAM and STEM education, but they package it up in a lovely little competition. How would you describe it?
I think I would describe it differently. So this is fascinating.
Tell me more.
I learned so much about creativity being involved there. I got involved. I had a niece that came home from school who had joined a team. And it's like, what the heck's a team? And it was to practice teamwork and team building and to learn different skills. But her challenge that they had chosen was they had to build 5 vehicles, each powered by a different kind of energy. So pneumatics, gravity, tension, I don't know. And each little vehicle had to go 20 feet and pop a balloon. So it's kind of got to go straight. And then the last one had to go 20 feet up 3 steps and pop a balloon. And she was in 3rd grade at the time. And so it's like, I couldn't even, they're young enough and naive enough that they don't realize it can't be done. So they figure out how to do it. And at that tournament, I then volunteered. As soon as, I volunteered. And then my first time in Instant Challenge as an appraiser, I had this horrible cold. And so I walked out to the appraiser lounge area and I said, I either need a Kleenex or I need a new nose. And somebody handed me a carrot. And she said, it works for snowmen. It was a little bit of an eye-opener, kind of, this is not, your everyday stuff. And I watched teams for years as an appraiser in the room before I ended up as challenge master, kicking people out of the hallway. And what I saw is that everybody's creative and that everybody gets stuck and that kids that I knew were really well coached knew how to get themselves unstuck. And I realized that that's what I do for a living, is I help clients get unstuck. And so at that point, then I did more volunteering in the organization. And then I went back to school for a degree in creativity. Yeah.
So what I love about our different experiences with how we got into that was I was a competitor from 2nd grade through senior year in high school. And then after that, I was an appraiser and a challenge master, and then somehow an affiliate director, and then somehow on the international board. So what's so funny is is those introductory narratives, right? Your introductory narrative to Destination Imagination was through your niece. And so getting to see it with a totally different mindset. And like, it's funny how sometimes we take those things for granted. And I think a lot of businesses and a lot of small businesses and nonprofits take for granted that like they know the story. And so I go into like, it's a creative problem solving competition for kids, and which really doesn't describe what it does. But the way that you described it really does do that.
Well, it's what it did for me anyway.
Yeah.
So it's cool that the same organization can have such different impacts on people's lives. But then, yes, eventually our paths got to the International Board of Directors for it.
Yeah.
And I think we both walked away from the board and decided to keep each other.
Amen. So, Janese, can you tell us a little bit more about kind of your journey into creativity and problem solving? And because you not only like do this for a living, is help organizations think differently through your company, the Strategic Toolbox, but you also went back and studied it.
I did. I was fascinated. So I still am. I have my MBA from like right after the earth cooled. I just paid for my sister to do her doctorate. Okay. And she and I were talking about my going back to school. And she said, you could be like 3 years older with or without the degree. So, either way, you're going to be 3 years older. And so I looked at a mix of programs. I looked at future studies about, it's a program out of Houston, I think, that is talking about what's probable and what's possible and what's preferable. And that was fascinating. I looked at a doctorate in fine arts in weaving out of Kansas, but they wanted me to move to Kansas for 3 years, and that wasn't going to happen. And then I found this program that is a Master's of Science in creativity and change leadership. And it's like, oh, goodness, that's what I do. So some of the program was new, and a lot of it was affirming of and kind of codifying what I already do for a living. I help people get unstuck. And I help them make better decisions. The thing is, nobody thinks they need that. And so what I sell is ideation and facilitation and marketing research. So it's kind of like think differently, set your priorities, and then see if they'll fly in the marketplace. So that's what I sell. But what I really do is I help people get unstuck.
So for somebody out there that is like, that's neat, but what the heck does that mean? Am I stuck? Like, what would you take kind of a client through? Or are they coming to you with an identified challenge already?
Quite often the challenge they're coming with is not really the challenge they need to solve. It's more it's more what they'd like to solve or what they've been told to solve. All right. So in the last couple of weeks, a client came to me to say, we need some new product ideas. It's hotly competitive, but it's kind of a bland category. There's got to be a way to stand out, and we need some big hits soon. What can you do? And so we talked about a mix of ways. But last week I ran co-creation labs. So I recruited creative consumers. I recruited consumers that are in their category. So I had to recruit like twice as many as we thought we wanted. And then I sent them a little creativity test that I've adapted from other creativity work that's out there, just to get a bent, because you need a certain amount of flexibility in thinking, and you need a certain amount of fluidity and an ability to add some detail to it, even though it's quite vague. Mm-hmm. We did that, and I had 5 clients in the room, so we had 5 different tables going and 2 or 3 respondents at a table, because if people are just making up ideas and consumers are just in there making up ideas and bouncing stuff off the wall, big fun, but they're missing a practicality kind of piece that if I put clients at the table with them and have coached the clients can go, how might we make sure that fits on the shelf? How might we attract a different audience? Or those kinds of things to help them branch out the ideas more. Okay. And you can't just say, okay, go create what the next idea in Cheerios is or whatever it is. We warmed up a little bit. And then I had them stop thinking about our challenge and go somewhere else and then relate it back to the challenge. Okay. I guess that sounds a little odd. Okay. So here's what we did. a different time, not this client, totally different. I ran into a friend who was working on Cheerios at the time, and he was in the grocery store looking for what might be the next idea for Cheerios. So I ran a session with other people, not Cheerios people, to say, okay, let's do this. And people chose different cards to help their brain flex. So if somebody took the gardening card, they're supposed to immerse themselves in gardening. Okay. So what are all the things that we know about what it takes to be successful? Things grow, things change, things need to be nurtured. Okay. So you immerse yourself there, and then you relate it back to Cheerios and say, so what would you do differently with Cheerios then? How could you learn from there? And they said, oh, we want the Cheerios to grow when you put milk on them. Oh, if it could just turn to mud, could the milk kind of turn to brown and mud and chocolatey? Or could you change colors? Cheerios has never changed colors. Could you change colors by season? Okay. The people that got the high-tech card wanted to put ones in the box, so they'd have a whole box of binary code. Okay. The people that got the rock and roll card wanted to put crack cocaine in the box. Okay. So they're not all good ideas, maybe, but where can you take that? And the idea of crack cocaine, not one that I would ever promote, is about having people want more of it, in theory. Okay. So in cereal, if you put fun things on the box and things to do, the box stays on the table and people tend to eat more. So you can then, it's a lot easier, you know this, it's a lot easier to make a wild idea practical than it is to invigorate a dull one. And so we use that kind of creativity and different ways to think and different ways to stretch and be flexible to bring it back to ideas that if I had just said, so what do you think the next thing in Cheerios should be? You wouldn't have gone there.
No.
No.
That's so fascinating. I was just doing, we use a tool called the Hero's Journey. And through this Hero's Journey framework, we challenge specifically like our more corporate clients to be like, get crazy, think fanciful, think all of these things, right? Try to get out of your everyday, like we'll bring it back, but we got to start from somewhere before we can bring it back. So Janese, one of the things that I find fascinating about you is also like big brands trust Janese to help them ideate, think outside the box, do some crazy things. But what is also really fascinating about that, I, having known you for a very long time, have no idea who you work with, right? And here's where I'm going with that. That trust that people have in you has been cultivated over a very, very long time. And so as you think about that story of trust, how do you integrate that you are that Janese Strategic Toolbox is the trustworthy container that these big brands can come to, and Janese isn't going to go sell it to the company right down the street and make millions and millions of dollars on it.
That wouldn't be fair. Okay.
That wouldn't be fair. You're absolutely right.
That would be the wrong thing to do. Yeah.
How do you maintain that culture of trust when you are kind of on the forefront of these really amazing new different products?
I don't know that I've thought about it that way, but let me try. One is you need to do what you say you can do. Amazing. When I first started this, a couple of weeks will be 24 years of being on my own.
That's incredible. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. I think this is very exciting and a little surprising. But you have to behave everywhere, like it or not, because all of the business, I have the website, but that's just so you don't get kicked out of business. You don't get business because of the website. Everything has been referral. It's amazing to me about what people will let you do. At this point, I've done work in 63 countries and 26 languages. And I thought that if they found out it was just me in the basement, the gig would be up. And it turns out nobody cares. As long as you can do what you say you can do. So that's part of it but when there's that history, when there's not that history and somebody referred me in and I need to bring them along with me on a journey, I don't surprise anybody And I hopefully delight some people. But the people that last week were building new product ideas with me, they knew what the plan was for the day, what the end goal was. They were in on each of the worksheets, what would happen next, what the challenge, where it might fall apart. Because when you're doing ideation, you can kind of plan the first 2 hours, but after that, you got to roll with what just came out.
Yeah.
And so I really do believe in a no surprises. I can go to delight, but a no surprises kind of thing. And so it is, even with the marketing research, it's not my data. It's all theirs. And just like their content, I'm sorry to be stammering here. What I realized a while back is, I thought, I could never write a book. I don't have any content. And what I realized is my content is process. I can help you get from here to here, and to bring a process and to help people open up further and then make transitions and see it differently. That is my content.
Well, let's transition to that. I think that's a beautiful bridge. I don't know if you did that on purpose, but what a beautiful bridge to a fun, delightful deck of cards that you've developed over your career that you call Brain Noodling. Mm-hmm. And so first, can you just introduce, I just have to say before we introduce it, I love Brain Noodling. I have the decks of cards literally like on my desk. They're getting really well used.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I should just start sending you pictures every time we use them, but then you can put it on your website.
I'd love to know how you use them.
Absolutely. But I'll share that with you. But could you kind of give us a primer on what is Brain Noodling? What is the product and what is it used for?
It's used to help people think differently. There is one that's kind of a starter pack called Brain Noodling. And it's got, what does it have in it? 50 cards, I think? Something like that. And a little bit of instruction piece to help you get started. Some of the cards are about ways to challenge yourself or ways to think differently. And then there's 2 products that I built that it's got enough cards to play with and think about, or there's a full deck then on its own. And one is Brain Bodies, which the number of times I've sat at this desk and said, what would my father have said? Or what would, my mentor have said? Or I have my Einstein action figure doll up there. What would Einstein do? Everybody has an Einstein action figure, I'm sure, but.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. And to try to look at it from a different point of view. And so I have given a couple of presentations at the Creative Problem Solving Institute out of New York on building a board of directors. And if you had a board of directors, who would you put on it? And so the deck has all these different cards of all different people, from Thurgood Marshall to Joan Rivers to Galton to any number of people, but a whole mix of whatever, like George O'Keeffe. So it'll have this drawing that we had done of George O'Keeffe, and then a quote of hers. And one of the ones I love about George O'Keeffe is about why she paints flowers. They're cheaper than models and they don't move. It's not that she loves flowers. It's just and to look at it from a different perspective. So knowing what she did in her life, so there's a few facts and that kind of thing, and then some questions to say, if she were on your board, how would she encourage you to look more closely at things? Because, the flowers are huge and you look right into it. Or how would she encourage you? What would she think about how you sell your wares? How you approach the world that way. And so there's all different people in there for so many walks of life, from Picasso, from politics to art to, it was just kind of fun to think up people and see who we might be able to do. But there's that array is Brain Bodies to build your own board of directors. And it depends, not all boards. I change my board fairly often. I should have a picture drawn of you and be able to make a card about Max on my board of directors. And then the other one is this idea of Brain Flex, which is the going into the gardening or going into rock and roll, whatever it might be, but going into a whole different industry. Last week I used zebras, and what do we know about zebras? Which was just kind of a fun way to sort of twist it, because...
What do we know about zebras?
Well,
I don't know that I know much about zebras.
really?
I don't think so.
A group of zebras is called a dazzle.
Well, now I want to know more.
Well, yeah. And their stripes are all different. They protect their young by putting the young ones in the middle of the herd. And they confuse the lions by moving back and forth so that the stripes make them go, what? And, okay, they fart when they run.
Oh, don't we all? I mean, I don't run, so.
I don't run that much. I know. I didn't really clock it ever. So, but I know that. So then if you relate it back to, industry or product marketing, a dazzle would be, how do you dazzle on a shelf? Africa would be, how did people know where you came from? How do they know your story? Those kinds of things. Anyway, so yeah, that's brain noodling. So there's a starter deck, and then there's, if you're trying for the full tool and being able to do that. And a new one's got to come out pretty soon.
Ooh, is that a preview? Is there a new a V2?
I hope so. Which is just all the different tools. I feel like I've spent my whole career building different tools to get at things in a new way. And so that deck is not a tool, but a series of tools and coaching about how to move forward.
I love that. And I so appreciate that, because I think one of the things that brain noodling has done for me is it's an exercise, right? In the same way that you exercise your body, the same way that you exercise a singing voice, same way that you exercise anything. It's when you practice creativity, when you practice using your imagination, when you practice, really what you're doing is you're practicing empathy by putting yourself in the shoes of another person, which is kind of a pivotal role in storytelling. But one of the things that I'm so delighted by with brain noodling is in the last year with AI, I feel like we're putting our own brains kind of up on the shelf and saying, hey, ChatGPT, come up with 37 ideas for XYZ thing. Mm-hmm. I'd be curious to hear thoughts on AI and how it's not necessarily replacing imagination, but it does feel like it's not the best friend to a highly creative society, because it takes some of the brain work that we have to do out of it.
Well, I do believe that creativity there's so many different kinds, but it takes practice. Anybody can do it. Absolutely. Anybody can get better at where they are. I find, and I think AI will be part of this. I know some people are threatened by AI and think it's going to take their job. And I think it's the people that know how to use AI that are going to take their job, that are willing to play with it, not AI itself. One of the basic components of creativity is having a comfort with ambiguity. And we have so lost that. The number of times, I have a little refrigerator magnet that says, I thought I'd invite some people over for dinner to look at their phones. The number of times somebody goes, oh, yeah, I'll look that up. And it's really no. Just let's talk about how that feels or what the possibilities might be. We are not comfortable. We have just so lost.
Let's debate it. Let's debate this thing that I think of as a fact and you think that's factually wrong. Let's debate it for a little bit. Let's come to our different perspectives and then we can look it up later. But that's fun.
If it is done from a spirit of let's explore, that's fun. If it's come from let me prove you wrong, that's not as much fun for me anyway. I appreciate that you're bringing up brain noodling and that you're enjoying it. And I'm so glad you're using it. The empathy piece, I think is fascinating. I just heard, how many times do we say? I heard it on NPR. So I was listening to public radio the other day, and Justin Trudeau was doing an interview. And it turns out he reads a ton of fiction. And they were asking him why he saw value in fiction. And I thought of you immediately, because his idea was you have to have stories to teach people empathy. That to have the characters that you can relate to or find something redeeming about helps people practice their empathy and learn how to appreciate each other. And that stories do that. He said he reads so much nonfiction, in his reports, but that the world is so lacking in empathy. And I thought of you immediately because you help people tell their stories better.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you thinking of us. And I do find that really fascinating because it is something that, especially as you're trying to share a story, as you're trying to invite somebody into a story, it's really hard to invite somebody into a story unless they feel like you have the remotest connection to them, right? Like people, I think I'm going to pick on the Midwest, but I think this is a global feeling as well. Like people want to feel like they have something in common with you, right? I think that's why we break bread together. I think that's why so many stories happen over a dinner table. I think that's why as people talk about themselves as foodies, you and I connected over a love of travel. But like we connect because of similarities. And it's fascinating how the differences can just kind of float away.
I would really agree that it is about finding that common ground and finding that empathy. My sister taught, Fives Alive or whatever really early at her PhDs or EDDs in early ed. And so much of what she was trying to teach the kids was how to be empathetic. That's part of what you learn about going to school. That's what kids that had their first couple of years with the pandemic really lost out on, was just how to navigate school. But yeah, the empathy thing is huge. And to find some common ground, so important. So how do you do that? How do you bring that out so that people can relate and find some nugget of initial connection?
So when we look at like the hero's journey, that's a framework that we use for really the basis of all of our story, whether that be through a website, through a written piece, through a video, any of those. What we really start to talk about is like, what is the problem that we're trying to solve and who are we trying to solve it for? Then in the little section about like meeting your guide, where, we need to meet our Yoda, right? In my case, I met my Janese. But we first establish empathy by identifying how do you know what the problem is that I'm trying to solve? And once we establish that empathy by saying like, I understand what you're going through because XYZ, I've been there before. I've gone through this problem. I've helped a dozen clients with the exact same challenge. I've done X, Y, and Z. Basically, that connection that says, I understand you. I'm not just trying to sell you something, but it really is, it's that idea of just the smallest little nugget. We work a lot in like rural broadband. We work a lot in nonprofits. Nonprofits are such a fun one because it's like nonprofits just have a really easy way of creating empathy and creating like a connection because as I look at like one of our clients is a large cancer foundation. Who hasn't had a family member or a friend or somebody whose life has been impacted by a cancer journey? And so it becomes easier than to make that connection and say, hey, like I get it because I've also been through a cancer journey, or I get it because we've helped hundreds of families through a cancer journey. And we have to do that before we establish the authority. Like, oh, I get you, you get me, like we're connected on that. Now, here's my resume. So many people want to jump right into the resume, right? And I think something that you do really beautifully is, and that's part of like that conversation about trust earlier. Like, I don't know the giant brands that you work with. I don't know. I don't know this for fact, but I have a feeling if you go down a grocery store aisle, you've probably seen a Janese Evans original. But I don't know, and I won't know. But what's interesting is like you jump into that empathy, like, hey, I've been where you are. Like I've worked with organizations that have been stuck. And here's now how I get them unstuck.
I think I have to push back on that a little bit, Max, because when clients, certainly on the marketing side, everybody knows that theirs is the only time that problem's ever surfaced in the world. And actually, there's a whole lot of commonalities about what people are coming and having challenges with about trying to make a difference or trying to be noticed or what it might be. I am not sure that they want me to be saying, I know exactly what you're going through because I've done that, because of the urge to be unique, just like everybody else, And so I tend to, and there are subtleties with what they're doing. Absolutely. I tend to say, haven't done that exactly, but had these components. And so we could put them together a different way. I call it Strategic Toolbox because it is about applying a whole mix of tools in new ways to be strategic.
I think we're saying the same thing in slightly different ways, because really what we're talking about is you're saying, hey, I haven't seen that exact piece, but I've seen X, Y, and Z, and now I'm going to put these three things together. That's your empathy and authority, right? What you're doing is you're establishing your authority to say like, oh, you're right. I don't know that exact problem, but I've seen this one and I've seen that one and I've seen that one. And I can take the best pieces from it and thread it to create a beautiful weave.
That's just what I do.
Yeah.
Theoretically, and I do weave. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay, so go back to nonprofit boards because I love working with nonprofit boards. In some ways, they're really hard.
Super hard.
Because, from my point of view, when I come in to facilitate their strategic planning or wherever it might be, tends to be there's high-powered people that are used to being right and being listened to all around the board table. And so one of the things that I need to do as a facilitator is to, keep the process moving, but also keep the room fair, to keep it balanced and equal, and to have people with such strong opinions come actually is more fun than having people with no opinions come. But it's a little bit different to balance through and lay them end to end and reach a conclusion,
So for the nonprofit executive director who might be listening to this podcast, or the small business owner who is stuck, and let's stick with the nonprofit folks.
Okay.
What are a couple of practical tips that you might give them as they're going into a strategic planning session, or just trying to get their board to think a little bit differently, think a little bit bigger?
There's not just one right way to do it. I make sure that in any session I do that we respect that people think differently, that they process differently. And so I make sure that we do some big group activities, that we do some individual written ones, because if people will write things down, they're more likely to be committed to it and actually say it. And some small group, and small enough so that they hear each other and they don't get lost and they still have to work together to come up with a solution. So I try to do all that with an economy of movement.
Yeah.
Like that in small groups, we work on flip chart sized pieces of paper that are pre-printed so that everybody has the same format so that they'll go together at the end. And so that whatever they're writing down is also, it's not like you're going to write it down over here and then put it on the big sheet. It happens right away. And then everybody gets to build on each other's ideas. So there's this making everybody contribute. And all right, I plan my spontaneity a little bit.
I love that. Great facilitators do that.
Well, thanks.
And you're a great facilitator.
I have a fabulous organization that I work with that has been called Bountifield, and they just have been absorbed into another great organization. But they have built several machines, but they're working on entrepreneurship in Africa to help Africa learn to feed itself. But their first machine would shuck peanuts and do this so much more efficiently and take hours back and give them back to families. And it cost $250. So a community would buy it. It was made to be repaired by a bicycle repairman because that's what they had locally. Mm-hmm. My favorite part is I got paid in peanuts for that one. I still have the bag of peanuts up there. But for my facilitation, I actually got paid peanuts.
That's incredible. But it also talks to your generosity. You give greatly, right? When you fall in love with an organization, you give greatly, and you give greatly of your time.
Thank you.
Why is that?
I have a skill set that not everybody has. Good, because otherwise I don't need the competition. The volunteerism has always been part of my DNA and my family's DNA. Just is what I think you grew up doing this too, but absolutely to give back, to feel more complete. It does it for me too. I mean, oh wow, can I blunder on this one? But I don't know. Why do you do it?
So what's fascinating is there are altruistic reasons for volunteering. Mine are selfish.
Oh, good. I love this.
Fully admit that. When I volunteer, I feel good. I feel like the little bit of helping that I do with the organizations that I work with can maybe make them 1% better. And so for me, the selfishness is not necessarily like external, but it's very internal. And there are so many, frankly, shitty things that are happening in the world right now. And there are so many inputs that we have as small business owners that don't feel very good. Right? I got to do my QuickBooks and, I have employees and somebody's mad about something and somebody's ego is running rampant. A client is mad, XYZ. But there's this really beautiful thing that happens when you are at the door of an organization where you love the mission and it just fills your cup a little bit. And then you get, and you don't necessarily need to think about it. You don't need to process it. You don't need to figure out all of the challenges that they're trying to figure out because they have a very capable and loving staff to do that. But you get to just have that one little bit of time where you are making just the tiniest bit of difference as a part of like a much bigger, broader mission. And to me, to be a really tiny part of a mission like that is really, really cup filling.
Oh, that's fascinating. Because I work so hard to not get vested in the product because I don't want to take on the challenge that they have. I need to stay independent. And so it's lovely to be able to bond with the mission of the organization and know that it's worthwhile. I also like to experiment on them.
Oh.
I make up new exercises and I don't just throw caution to the wind and we always get to where we need to be. It's amazing. We do have a little faith in the process, but we try out new things. We approach different ways to put groups together.
I guess from a Tellwell perspective and from a professional perspective, the reason that I love the nonprofits that we work with and the causes that we work with is like, they're so trusting in us, which is great. And they like so quickly volunteer to do exactly what you're talking about. And, I have probably a half a dozen or so that I'm just like, hey, we're thinking about trying this new thing. We're thinking about launching this product line. Can we try it on you? Like, you're going to get XYZ for a greatly reduced cost or for free or whatever it is. And the number of times that they've been like, yeah, that's awesome, is so fun. Because they're just like so willing to try new things. And if it takes just like, if it alleviates just a little bit of a challenge that they're having, they're all game for it. So that's a really fun perspective.
Because the challenge is certainly real. The challenge is real and you're still solving or helping them solve their own. It's kind of like helping them get out of their own way, actually.
That's so fun. So Janese, as we kind of wrap up, you've been doing this for almost 24 years now. You've seen a lot of things come and go. You've seen products come and go. You've seen processes come and go. You've seen best practices come and go. I'm not asking you to choose like your
that just made me be really
favorite.
old, but okay.
I'm not asking you to choose your like one single favorite piece of advice, but just what is a piece of advice that you would have for fellow small business owners, nonprofit executives, anybody who is trying to think differently and be more creative besides buy your product?
Oh, I didn't say that, but that's lovely too. That's lovely too. I would say it's about challenging your assumptions.
Ooh.
Oh, is that a
Keep
surprise?
Going. I'm so excited.
Because you got great eyebrows there. Okay. I think that we don't, the tricky part about assumptions is you don't recognize them. And so one of the things that we sit down to do is you got to know that you're breaking the rules. You got to know where the rules are so that you can break them. And to do some work to figure out what you've always been assuming. I mean, when you think about libraries, what did we know? It's a big brick building. You go in, you take books out, you have to sign for them. You have to bring them back at a certain time. Yeah. And there's only like one in the middle of town. So if you break all those rules, you now have tiny little libraries that people donate to that are free, that you don't ever have to return it. Or you get bookmobiles that the books then come to you. So that the only way to innovate is to understand what you think what you have for assumptions and be able to choose which ones you really need to keep and which ones are flexible, which ones you can bend with. It takes some practice. It's not comfortable, to challenge the way that you think. But I think that is the first thing we have to do. People come to me with knowing what it is that they need to solve. And after we talk about it for a little bit, it's kind of like, it might be this that we need to solve first, or, because most of my questions are about, if you knew that, what would you do next? And that takes people to a place of, maybe I didn't need to know that. Maybe or maybe I already know what I'm going to do next. So then, okay, that would be another trust piece, Max, about what I do. I talk people out of research all the time because they already know what they want. And what I help them do is manage the risk in their decisions and make better choices. So I don't know, you getting anything out of this? Because I'm having a good time, but I'm not sure what you need.
Well, we're almost 50 minutes in, and...
Can I tell you one idea?
Yes.
Okay. You know how you do the hero story and you have people, you explain something about think bigger and go differently? I was doing that at Microsoft and years ago. And what I had them do was, in small groups, they had to come up with such an outrageous idea that they would get fired.
That's so fun.
And it took them a little while to get used to the idea, but okay. And then we switched groups and they had to take the other person's idea to get fired and go make it practical. And you just get so much further out because you get to know which rules you can break or not.
Oh, I love that. I might steal that as an idea.
Do that. I'm sure I stole it somewhere.
As we're going into our strategic planning as an organization, because we're coming up on 10 years, and which that 10 years went so fast.
Do you need a facilitator?
Yeah, actually, let's talk about that offline. That sounds great.
Okay, because that's the other thing is people behave better when there's an outsider in the room.
They really do.
They really do.
So really the idea is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but yes.
That's what you've just been saying.
I need to listen to myself more.
You really should, because you are...
Every now and then, good stuff comes out.
So wise and so delightful. Janese Evans, thank you so much for joining us. If people want to connect with you, if they want to buy Brain Noodling, where do they connect with you?
Evans at strategictoolbox.com, or just strategictoolbox.com will get you to me.
Fantastic. Janese, thanks as always. Love a conversation with you, and stay creative.
You too. Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Tellwell the Podcast. A review goes a really long way, so please give us 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. On behalf of my co-host, Max Kringen, and I, thank you so much for listening, and please continue to share your story.
If we hold tight, we can chase the Mississippi through the night. Hundreds of miles.